The most important thing for me in my youth was that I spent the war years at my farmer grandfather's small farm in central Finland. In a normal, rather poor farming situation. And since I was the only child of the family at that time, in the beginning of the war, I followed the family members in their daily work. But then I have had also huge amounts of time to spend myself. And in the country life, the grandparents and parents were not worried of your safety because that was assumed that even a kid takes care of himself. So I spent a lot of time in the fields and by the river and in the forest. And that is where from where my interest in animal architecture started. And I'm increasingly aware of the importance of certain situations and experiences in my early childhood that have been formative. For instance, my book in Interest in Books is clearly related with the fact that during the war, the attic of the humble house of my grandfather was my art gallery and library, because there were old journals, not even journals, newspapers. And then my biggest treasure was a wallpaper, 2 books of wallpaper samples. In that time when there was no radio, nothing during the war, the wallpapers were just an endless joy. I remember still how I ran up the stairs to the attic to look at wallpaper samples. But they were, visual, how would I say, nourishment for a very curious young boy.
Was it, presumably these were kind of abstractions, or were they quite figurative? Or
some of them were figurative.
Yeah. But something that you could put your imagination into.
Yes. And I think that I would say almost a skill of seeing the essence of things and reading through abstraction derives from those wallpaper patterns.
Brilliant.
Much later. My mentality is completely a farm boy's mentality, to the degree that when I'm addressed as a phenomenologist, I say, yes, a farm boy's phenomenology, because phenomenology is the art of looking, unbiased looking. And that's what I learned in my childhood. I could watch, for instance, a swallow's nest from 6 inches distance. When there was in the barn, there was a nut hole in the log, and the swallow had just constructed his nest there on the other side, so I could watch it from this distance. And I still remember that I was wondering, why do the swallows, when they come with a piece of clay, wet clay from the, I knew where the pit where they got it. They came there, they shook their head like this, before sticking the clay there. I couldn't understand. until I went to practice at the construction site, and I saw the concrete guys. What is the name of the device that?
The mixer.
Not mixer, but the thing that takes away the air from the concrete.
Yes, it's a compressor.
Yes, yes. I realized this is exactly the same thing. The birds knew that they have to get rid of the extra water, because that would otherwise the construction would not be strong enough. Well, it is immanent wisdom. It is wisdom itself, because that is testified wisdom, because the process of evolution cuts away any unsuccessful idea. And that is exactly the difference between animal architects and human architects. We are building prototypes all the time. Building prototypes that are really never tested.
Because our culture protects us from.
Well, our culture believes in newness. Nature doesn't believe in newness. It believes in tested cases and tested qualities. No, not really. I don't have too much. I don't believe too much in biomimetic architecture or design, because it's not the form or the nest or whatever structure it is that is important. It is its role in the continuum of evolution and in the continuum of the life of the species. It is exactly this continuum that we lack. We try to invent, as Miss van der Rohe said, new architecture every Monday morning.
Great. Great.
Well, I realized that something is architecture as a kid. My grandfather's house was like this on a low hillside. Then here was sauna, and here was a long cowhouse, and there was a axis, and which one realized even in the echo. There was a special echo when standing there, and it really got my imagination going, this echo. And I realized that there is a thought in how these buildings have been placed. So I realized something, I think, rather fundamental in architecture when I was 6 years old. I didn't know how to call it, but I sensed it.
The positioning of the building. And
positioning the buildings in relation to each other in a meaningful way. And that is architecture. Positioning things in meaningful ways. That's architecture. For me, architecture is choreography, which is another way of saying placing things in a meaningful way. For me, this is the very foundation of any creative person is the sense of self, which also, of course, means self in relation to the world, which introduces the ethical dimension right there. And I think it is, in my view, it's almost useless to start to teach architecture technical discipline or as an aesthetic discipline without first setting a fire in the heart of the young person that he or she wants to know, because the success of education relies exactly on that. Without that internal fire, no, the greatest teacher cannot make a skillful architect. We are all self-made in this sense. And it is this process that a good teacher initiates and supports. Simply relating yourself with the world. I think the wrong goal of education is too popular nowadays, to evoke egos. I'm suggesting the total opposite.
Yeah.
The loss of the ego. Wisdom is the highest level of human qualities. Wisdom cannot be objectified. It's a completely unfocused capacity to understand what. Just understand. Just understand. That is becoming very rare in today's world. One of the things that is becoming rare also is individuals with wide visions. Because we are a culture that believes in specialization, believes in expertise. One of my favorite writers, the Russian Nobel Prize laureate Joseph Brodsky, he writes, a writer does not collect expertise, he collects uncertainties. That's what a good architect also does.
Yeah.
Well, I have sometimes written that any city that is situated by water is a lucky city. And for me, the element, physical element that, how would I say, has a dialogue, easiest dialogue with architecture is water. And Brodsky elaborates on these ideas quite very nicely. I'm not a historian at all, and my reading in history is a personal reading from certain points of view. Simply, there is so much in Italian history that has been important for me, from the pre-Renaissance painters through Renaissance, that have been so important for me. Whenever I begin a new architectural design project, I don't go to the section in my library where architectural journals to look at works by other architects on the same kind of a task. I took one of these books on early Italian painting. Fra Angelico, for instance, is a supreme stimulus for architectural thought, a pure architectural thought. And it's not a surprise that Alvarado in his youth was very much inspired by by Giotto and Fra Angelico.
Mm. Is there a particular reason that these two painters?
Well, the entire early Renaissance painting, as well as icon paintings through history, have a kind of a childlike naivete, where buildings are presented as human beings. They have the human proportions, and it is just so endearing, this conversation between buildings and human beings in these paintings.
Wonderful.
Today we understand nothing of that. We used the word wisdom a bit earlier. This is the wisdom of not separating things from each other.
Okay. Yeah.
Our culture, in its very essence, is a culture of separation, because that's the process by which investigation is made. I think art is trying to do the opposite movement, to put things back together. Poetry is my example for artistic work. When I teach students, the poet sees something general and significant and historical and prehistorical in an image, and then gives it a new life.
Yeah.
I usually most often write because I have been commissioned to write. And the process starts with somehow thinking about what I have been asked to do. And then I forget what I have been asked to do. And then things begin to somehow appear or just come through my pencil. And I never have a preconception for any of my essays. I mean, as an entity, no, never. They it's like sculptors, molding work piece by piece, and then the pieces take form and they suggest other pieces, and that's how it goes in my work, and I guess would be true for any artist. What's the name of the writer of the satanic
versus Salman Rushdie?
Salman Rushdie has a wonderful line where he speaks about the creative work, and his idea, what he says is that it is a point where the writer permits the world to flow into him and him to flow into the world. I think it's a beautiful and precise description. I always advise my students to keep away from professionalism, because it's the professionalist attitude that kills your pure intentions, and it also kills your ethical sense. And I'm old enough to say this to any architects association also, and I have written now recently a couple of times that we architects are to blame for this catastrophic situation of architecture in the world, where we have become just a service profession for finance people and developers.
Because of the loss of ethics.
Exactly, loss of self-identity, self-respect. And architects associations around the world have been repeating the same mistake. They try to defend the architect's profession. No, they should defend architecture. Architecture as a form of art. Well, I would first say that argue against your premise. Common people are perhaps consciously uninterested in architecture and consciously unable to verbalize what it means. But in the, existential life, architecture has a significant unconscious task and perpetual function. What would an unknown person in the street know of history without the city and its layers that the person lives in? So architecture is an art form that penetrates human life, and it does not have to be intellectually or theoretically understood. It can just be faced and enjoyed. Or also in the negative cases, people become ill. There was a famous study in the late 60s in America of slum residents who who had been living in slum conditions, who were taken away from the housing areas because it was rebuilt. The sorrow of lost home was the same as the sorrow of a lost relative. That was the result of a psychological study. That just shows how deep our tie with specific settings, and particularly the home. Mm-hmm. Home is a place for the naked human being. Only there you feel safe enough and protected enough to be naked. But I don't believe architects think about nakedness nowadays. All of these things have to be thought and felt. Otherwise, how could they come through in a design task if the maker had never thought about them? Our culture is getting too smart in forgetting our mental history, the history of the mind. And it is rather almost shocking to me that Sigmund Freud published interpretation of dreams in 1900. So it was a kind of a door to the century of modernity. And early modernity was, of course, very interested in the subconscious and dreams and so forth. In today's world, forgotten. Architecture is just surface, nothing else. Yeah. Well, as you know, I have studied and written quite a lot on vision, particularly the alteration of vision, or actually the first the change in the hierarchy of the senses in the 17th century, when until then we had been hearing and smelling and touching creatures, but we turned into visual creatures. And this is even more so accelerated today, when everything becomes, increasingly visual. So I see this as a not only a, how would I say, sad thing in the way we are, architects and artists tend to think, but a real threat to humankind. And I'm here again thinking of evolution. We were not certainly designed as people who would watch images all day. Even our eyes are not for high level of light. We are creatures of shadow. In the African savanna, the early people did not move in the daytime. They slept and they hunted in the evening and early morning in dim light. And our eye still is most sharp when the illumination is low enough. So this is just an example of how much harm we might be doing for ourselves with all these inventions. And it is a biological fact that it takes 50,000 years for a learned property or quality to become turn into our genetic constitution. 50,000 years. One of the problems today, I think, foundational problems is that we do not see ourselves in the process of evolution. Do you know what these triangles are here in the pink triangles?
Oh, these are residual eyelids, right?
Yes, they are called.
Still have them, don't
Yes, they are called plica semilunaris, and they are the points where the horizontally moving extra eyelids were fixed when we were lizards.
Yeah.
So evolutionary history is right in our gaze,
Yeah.
but we don't care. I think curiosity is a very important talent. Children have curiosity, but they lose it. And that is as a consequence of wrong education. Education should promote and strengthen the sense of curiosity. Today's thinking in pedagogy is to fill in those holes and stop curiosity. Curiosity is I think, the most important human capacity is intuition and imagination, because without imagination, we would not even have an ethical sense. We need to be able to think what consequences our alternative choices have. Otherwise, there is no ethical choice. But curiosity is the instinct that brings us next to the interesting things. And I would dare to say that my life has been guided by the farm boy's curiosity. I'm still the farm boy who was standing by the river with brown water running through my grandfather's farm, and I knew each fish in the river, and I had given them names. And when my grandmother asked me said, "Juhani, could you go and catch 3 fishes for a fish soup?" I said, "Which ones shall I catch?"
Fantastic.
in principle, art, genuine art, is an area which expresses the human being, humanity, most purely. Science, for instance, by very definition, takes pieces of this. Art presents and projects the human in its very essence. One of my close friends in school days was a famous Finnish modernist painter, modernist composer, Paavo Heininen, who died a year ago. And he said to me once, all arts say the same thing. This is how it feels to be a human being.
Mm.
I think it's a very, very fine definition for art. The real quality of art is in relation to its authenticity. Also, in the case of the child, very soon the children's drawings will pick up themes from the adult world. For instance, the house becomes the with a chimney.
Yeah, and the sun.
Yes. But so I would, instead of teaching the children, it would the adult values and qualities, it would be better to protect their imagination as long as possible. That's also what I'm trying to do in my teaching to architecture students, to somehow evoke and protect their personal imaginations instead of the kind of a standardized image of what architecture is.